Hello, and welcome back to Season 2 of Coaching in Higher Education, your go-to podcast for coaching professionals and those interested in coaching at colleges and universities. We have a lot in store for you this season, and we'll be branching out into some less explored areas of how coaches can bring tremendous and sustained value to higher education institutions and their people. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to check out the 16 conversations I had with my brilliant guests in Season 1. The link is below. So let's get started. Hi, I'm Tim Jansa, a leadership and organizational development coach and your host for this podcast. As we have seen in Season 1, being an internal or external coach in higher education allows us to help our clients tackle some daunting challenges, be they interpersonal, systemic, organizational, political, or structural. If there's one thing that we've learned is that we're dealing with tremendous complexity at our institutions. And that is precisely where a new book titled Transformative Coaching for Faculty and Staff in Higher Education, Powerful Tools to Address Institutional Challenges comes in. I have found it to be an invaluable tool and resource for coaches in the higher ed space. So it's a pleasure to dedicate this first episode of Season 2 to this ambitious work. To talk about this edited volume, it's a great pleasure to have as my guests today two of the editors. Dr. Karen Gonzalez Rice is a professor of art history and faculty coach with the Center for Teaching and Learning at Connecticut College, and her colleague, Dr. Susan Hrach, who's a professor of English at Columbus State University in Georgia. Karen and Susan, welcome to the podcast.
Delighted to be here, Tim.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to be talking about this book.
And Karen, I think you have a PSA before we get started, right?
Yes. Thank you. You can see my colorful Band-Aids on my forehead. Here is your PSA to go to the dermatologist for your annual skin cancer screening. You know, we're talking about coaching, we're talking about well-being, and sometimes academics don't make time for doctor's appointments.
So it's important as coaches to take care of ourselves as well and our health and well-being. Well said. Well, see, we've already done some good today, so I love this. All right. So as I was reading the book, I have to say, I came to appreciate more and more how truly ambitious in scope it is and how holistic, as much as that's even possible, the book really is. So what got you started on this volume and how did it evolve over time?
Well, Karen was so gracious as to connect with me a couple of years ago about proposing a session for the POD Network Conference, the Professional and Organizational Development Network. And we hosted a Birds of a Feather meeting on coaching, which we suspected would be an interesting topic, but we got a great turnout, sort of a bigger capacity room crowd than we imagined. And Kitty Maynard was one of those in attendance. And so after that very lively conversation at POD, Kitty reached out to see what sort of follow-on projects Karen and I might be thinking about, and we were in fact thinking about writing. And so Kitty said, I want to be a part of it. And after the three of us had another conversation or two, she said, I'm going to reach out to Katie Lindner and see if she might want to be a part of this, which she did and accepted immediately. And I think the foursome is really responsible for the ambitious scope of the book. It took all four of us.
So in the title, you include the adjective transformative. Why is that?
Well, that's such a great question, Tim. Thank you. So transformative is a word that we thought and talked a lot about. We wanted to signal that in the volume, we're really kind of engaging multiple approaches to change work. So, you know, there's certainly a kind of tradition of transformational leadership and transformational coaching that kind of has its own lineage. And we want to acknowledge that, although none of us are from that particular lineage. But we wanted to, to nod to that We also know that there's a kind of vast array of disciplinary perspectives on transformational change and transformation that coaches in higher ed might be bringing to their work. And the other thing is that we have all been part of transformational work in higher education, whether that's curricular redesign or diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work, or a full range of work that's envisioning change in higher education. So we really wanted to engage with that, as well as beyond academia. People like Adrienne Marie Brown in Emergent Strategy, who talks about transformation as local and iterative and justice seeking. So we really wanted to engage this kind of full range of concepts around transformation. And I'll say just one more thing about transformation. There's a lot to say about transformation and coaching. But I think that we also have seen transformation happen in our own experience with coaching, whether that is, as clients ourselves and as coaches. We've seen the opportunity and the possibility that's available through coaching.
Well, change certainly is inevitable. And I think it's one of the things that I've learned too, being a coach, is that we have to change with the times, with our clients' needs. And I think for somebody who doesn't know, it's easy to dismiss coaching as something that just supports people and makes them feel good. There's so much more to it. And we can really have a massive impact on how our clients function, how their institutions function. And we could truly support, indirectly though, a real transformation, a real change. The question is, how do we approach it? And I think coaching is so powerful in that we're kind of tapping into the intrinsic motivation and what's happening internally in our clients. And I think this is why it's so much more meaningful and sustainable. So thank you for explaining that, Karen. I really appreciate it. So when I just looked at the table of contents, I noticed that you spent almost 100 pages on coaching fundamentals. So what coaching is, how to learn the craft, so do the education, the training, the certification, how to build capacity and the skill set as a coach. Was that something that just emerged while you were working with your contributors, or was that planned from the get-go?
So we very intentionally created that section and put it at the beginning because our goal for the book, the whole vision of the book, was to start a conversation about coaching in higher education. We knew that coaching was already taking place, but we just didn't see the kind of rich conversation happening that we wanted to participate in. And to have a shared conversation, we need a shared understanding of what coaching is. And we also wanted to appeal to folks and really reach out to folks who might be curious about coaching. So there's this sort of this way in which we're inviting folks in to coaching as well. So we wanted to both create a kind of foundational place from which to have these conversations, a shared understanding, and we wanted to reach out to folks who are curious and who may not know. We often get questions about certification. Certification comes up a lot. Why do I need to be certified, or what is certification? So a lot of this too is responding to questions that we received around coaching.
Yeah, I would add to that, because we all believe in coaching so much, we are wanting to recruit new practitioners and people who can see the value. And so we did want to do a certain amount of clarifying for people who are new to the idea of coaching.
And I love that, because you're really tapping into something that's happening anyway, particularly in industry. I think there's much greater awareness, or there has been much greater awareness over the last 10 years or so. This whole shift from leadership, or leaders as coaches, or managers as coaches, that these traditional top-down command and control structures are really not working in the 21st century, especially since COVID, where a lot of employees are embracing a much more values-driven
Mhm.
angle and attitude toward work. So coaching, I think, comes in as a very impactful tool and at a great time. So I think opening this up to people to just explore the field of coaching, what it actually is, I think is really, really clever on your part to include that in the book and just give people just a broader overview of what coaching actually means. So what I really appreciate about your book is that it touches on a bunch of different angles where coaching can provide an avenue to tackle challenges on campus. So how did you end up structuring in the book the way it is now? You know, you did the foundations of coaching, then coaching specific scenarios, specific audiences, coaching the academic career life cycle. I thought that was a really interesting thing. And also different coaching modalities, so one-on-one, group coaching, teams coaching, peer coaching, and so forth. What can you say about the structure and how it is, what it is?
Yeah. We sent out as broad of a call for contributions as we could think of. We used all of our networks, encouraged people to share widely, and then waited to see what kinds of contributions we would get. And once those started rolling in, we took our first stab at a table of contents that was really grouped by context. It was sort of what might you be interested in? You could read this section or that section sort of without any need to move through it in a systematic way. But then we recognized there were some gaps. We needed to solicit a couple of more topics from people who we knew were working in those spaces. And then we started thinking more about what Karen was describing earlier, really wanting to sort of provide a way for people to make sense of the whole point of coaching, what it is, why does it matter, and then move through kind of a skills development approach so that we could have readers prepared to think about specific kinds of audiences, specific kinds of contexts, and wrapping up with some more organizational change, kind of large, big picture topics. And so we're hoping that the book really now works as almost like a learning experience.
I love that, Susan. The book is a learning experience because one of the things we were very intentional about is building the book as a coach-like experience, as a kind of inviting reflection, right? We have reflection questions for each section, and we have multiple pathways that we identify in the introduction that based on maybe your identity or the hats that you wear in your institution or particular interests, right? There's a lot of different ways that you might experience the book. I think we've all had the experience of being kind of overwhelmed by an edited volume. And we wanted to really kind of invite folks to navigate in a way that makes sense for them, which again is sort of a reflection of our coaching values. So we really wanted to structure the book in a way that reflected our values as coaches, reflected our ways of being as coaches.
Please pardon the interruption. This is your friendly reminder that if you're enjoying today's episode, to please click like and to subscribe to the podcast. Your support is really important to us. Also, please check out the companion website, higheredcoaching.us or leadershipimagined.com/podcast. Thanks so much. And now back to the episode. What got me really excited when I even just read the title of the book is that you included the word staff in it. It's for faculty and staff, because a lot of times when we're discussing any kind of organizational development, leadership development, professional development on campus, I would say 80% of the time we're talking about faculty or academic professionals, academic leaders. So staff are pretty much a group that is often somewhat neglected. So why did you deliberately include the word staff in the title? And what changes actually when in our discussion about coaching when we intentionally also coach staff, so middle managers and professional staff?
Yeah, I think as Karen was saying, the need for our values to be reflected here really made it imperative for us to talk about the whole breadth of academic professionals, including student affairs professionals, IT staff, everyone who makes a university tick. And in our practice as coaches, we also work with staff on a regular basis. And so it was part of our experience that this was a really important population to be able to address.
Staff are so crucial, and our institutions really shape student experiences as well, that working with staff in some ways can be even more transformational for the institution than other populations. So, I mean, I've definitely experienced that in my own internal coaching, working with staff and being able to see the kinds of stepping into leadership roles, the sorts of work that supports the sustainability of their work. I know many of our institutions are experiencing kind of a mass exodus for various reasons, whether that's the kind of voluntary retirement packages that are being offered for budgetary reasons, or just that our sector is very challenging, right? And the more that we can support folks to thrive and stay in this sector, in this sort of amazing and bizarre world of higher education that we find ourselves in, I think we've really seen how it can support that work.
Well, you mentioned values, and one of my values has always been cross-functional, cross-disciplinary collaborations, and really doing the work that needs to be done rather than sitting on your title and function and job description and so forth. And I think this is something where there's still a lot of work to be done, because there still is this gap, this divide between faculty and staff who kind of eye each other with suspicion. And then, of course, if you mention the administration, a lot of people just go in there, either roll their eyes or something. There's a lot of work that has had to be done. Susan, in our last conversation, and I wrote this down, you mentioned addressing that exact issue, which is the faculty staff divide, as a cultural need. And I love that. And there's the great quote in one of the chapters that deals specifically with intercultural considerations for coaches. And the quote is, the development of cultural competence in coaching is a professional imperative, period, end quote. And I think this is such a powerful statement. In your opinion, what role do cultural considerations play in higher ed coaching?
Yeah, I think the deep humility needed to be able to work across cultures in higher ed is something that Anne-Marie Edwards, one of our contributors, really addresses beautifully. There are cultural differences depending on your role, like faculty or staff, and in particular, that can be one that an institution needs to work very intentionally to try to bridge. But then there's also this diversity of cultural backgrounds from, the kinds of global populations that we're so privileged to be able to bring together to do the work of research and teaching at a university, but that come with challenges. People have lots of different backgrounds and ways of behaving that we need to be sensitive to, that we need to be aware of our own, and this is mostly what's called for, really, our own perceptions and backgrounds that may shape the way that we interact with others. And so cultural sensitivity in a coaching space is so important, because we need to believe in the client as the expert in their own lives and in their own work. And so unlike being a mentor, for example, where it's your job to kind of anticipate how this person might need your guidance. In coaching, we really need to believe in their inherent um, um, ability to address their own challenges and to bring that out in each person that we work with. And so being having some awareness of cultural competence, I think is absolutely essential.
And I would add that this is one of the ways in which coaching can be an anti-racist practice. And this sort of self-reflection as coaches. It's so crucial for us to do that in our work so that we can support our clients, so that we can support the kind of quite diverse set of folks that we encounter on college and university campuses.
I've taught a couple of workshops where we looked into certain psychometric assessments and looked at how people relate to each other, they interact. And one of the things that I found fascinating is how everybody immediately focuses in on the disciplinary differences, the different disciplinary cultures, faculty culture, but even there is no such thing as a faculty culture. Is it research faculty? Is it teaching faculty? Is it in the humanities? Is it in the STEM disciplines? How are people leading, relating, interacting when they're leading a lab, when they're research scientists, for example? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you have people who are administrators and various level of staff. So there are different behavioral patterns that emerge, but a lot of times what this seems to cover up is that, as you mentioned, Susan, we have tremendously diverse campuses, even in terms of national origins, for example. Especially in the United States, we have researchers and faculty members and staff who are from all over the world. And sometimes these interpersonal conflicts that arise are due to certain cultural norms that everybody brings to campus, but we always think about the disciplinary and the functional and the structural aspects of relating first. So I think that's always fascinating when I work with coaches and I say, well, have you considered these other aspects? And there's like, well, that kind of explains why I'm having sex. Okay, there you go, right? So these things are definitely important to look at. So there are two areas of focus in your book that I found really compelling and that stuck out to me personally. And one is coaching department chairs. That's something, that I've talked about quite a bit and have a lot of personal experience working with clients. So this one is something that I was happy to see, but I almost expected to see. But the other one that I had not expected to see is the idea of productivity coaching. Again, which I hadn't really thought of in these terms. Is this something that you wanted to include from the get-go, or was this a topic that your authors brought to you?
Tim, I could talk about productivity coaching all day long. So I'm so glad you asked this question. I think for higher ed folks, productivity is often the starting point for coaching. In my personal experience, my first engagement with coaching was when I needed to finish my book. And I reached out to a coach, the inimitable Natalie M. Houston, who wrote the
foreword.
Foreword, thank you. She wrote the lovely foreword to our book. But I reached out to her. She was, my first experience with working with a coach, and it was because of the hard deadlines that we have in higher education and the high stakes of those deadlines, right? So, finishing a book on time impacts tenure, which then it's this whole kind of domino effect. For my clients, I know Susan, as for you as well, I know we often have folks coming to us because of productivity challenges. Now, over time, you end up bringing up much more, right? Because productivity, this is maybe my perspective on productivity, but it really roots deeply into our values. how we spend our time, the things that we prioritize in our lives, the ways in which we're buffeted by the expectations of others and how we manage that. These are really speaking to the deepest parts of ourselves. And I would say that productivity challenges are a kind of a door for folks. So we very intentionally wanted to include productivity.
I think it's not so much the concept of productivity, but I think it's more that productivity as an umbrella concept to cover areas that normally we treat differently. So time management is one of them, for example. Figuring out what needs to be done first. I've worked with a couple of clients who really were struggling with that because there was so much going on. So I think focusing on productivity as like the overarching concept that we're trying to work on. I think that was probably the one thing that surprised me. And I think it's a brilliant move, to be honest. And one more thing about the productivity aspect, I think productivity is such a great word because it means different things to different people at different levels of the organization. So just like there is a shift in identity that a lot of folks, as they move up and around campus, have to undergo, I think the idea of productivity also shifts. More, let's say, from a research agenda or something that is more at the center of attention, let's say for tenure track faculty versus somebody who goes into administration or leadership. So again, I applaud you for bringing productivity as such a central node for coaching activities on campus. Karen, I'd love to ask you about another aspect of the book that I think is really valuable, and that is the issue of personal well-being and belonging. A lot of times, we talk about just personal conflict, we talk about structural things, leadership training, and so forth. Why, in your words, would you say that well-being and belonging are important, and how can we as coaches support creating that sense of and the importance of taking care of ourselves before we take care of others?
So we in higher ed are not okay. And we've not been okay since well before the pandemic, when we've been experiencing pretty significant budget cuts, crumbling infrastructure, the enrollment cliff, right? Lots and lots of challenges, and I won't elaborate them here because we all know, right, how hard things have been, much less the pandemic, right? So for me, my focus on well-being really began well before I was a coach. Many years ago, when I was working with the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Learning as a kind of pedagogy consultant, or working with faculty around pedagogy, and I started to notice that really the kind of work that we do in the classroom is directly connected to our values. I mean, it's really kind of obvious when you say that, but what we care about, who we are as humans, and the things that matter to us are at the root of our relationships with students and the way that we are in the classroom. And I just didn't see a lot of programming or even like articles or really anything about this topic. And so I started to create my own programming at my institution around well-being, around taking care of ourselves, around knowing ourselves better so that we could be better teachers. For me, that was really the kernel of becoming a coach. That seed of the realization that who we are in the classroom, who we are on campus matters. So, how do we really address that is one of the questions of the book that we felt was really important. Well-being is the basis. Without well-being, this is not a sustainable sector.
Yeah. I think this is a great spot to also pitch another book very briefly. It's Kevin McClure's not so new book now, The Caring University. I think that's something. And Karen, when you said we're not okay, Kevin also wrote this article, We Are Not Okay. I think that was in 2021 or 2022 that you might have been referring to. So I'll put that on the companion side as a link so people can read this. If there's one thing you would like for readers of your book to take away, what would that be?
So I kind of think of at least two audiences. I think for coaches reading this book, I hope that coaches feel that they're not alone in doing this work. It can sometimes feel isolating when you're maybe the only internal coach, or maybe the only person at your in your unit or something who is doing this work. You're not alone. There's so many people in higher education doing this work, and I think that's one of the things that surprised me about working on this volume is just the vast array of folks who are already doing coaching in higher education. So you're not alone, and your work matters. This work is so important, and it makes a difference, to echo Tim, as you said. And then for folks who are new to coaching, new to thinking about coaching in higher education, curiosity. I hope that this sparks questions and curiosity and paying some attention to what's going on and what's possible with coaching in higher ed.
Yeah, Karen, I think I would build on that last statement. I want readers to take away the value of asking questions and how much more productive, and productive's not even the right word, fruitful the interactions with colleagues and students and across the university, our work can be when we're focused on asking good questions rather than coming in with the mindset of needing to be experts, which is pretty challenging in this particular industry because that's part of our major identity. We know we have the answers. And this is really about coaching is so much about asking people not to be the expert, to trust your partner in the experience to have the answers, and for your role to be to draw them into what they already know.
Words to live, lead, and coach by. Thank you both so much. Karen, I have to steal the expression you used a couple of minutes ago, a wonderful delight. And it has been a wonderful delight for me to have you both on this program. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for everything you do to support coaching, especially coaching in higher education, where we can make a tremendous impact. It was a pleasure to have you on, and I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation.
Thank you so much, Tim.
And to our audience, thank you for spending a little bit of time with us today. As always, if you're interested in more information on this episode, our guests, Susan and Karen, and today's topic, please visit the companion website at higheredcoaching.us or leadershipimagined.com/podcast. And please check out season 1 of the podcast and those fantastic conversations in those 16 episodes. See you again soon. And until then, keep making a difference, one client and one conversation at a time. Take care.